friends, my name is Heather. Welcome back to my channel. And today is the one day I allow myself to be negative on BookTube because we are in fact talking my worst books of 2024. And the disclaimer that everybody loves to give, I understand that these are only my opinions and that there are people out there who loved these books. In fact, some of these books were book club picks for my in real life book clubs. And while I did not find them favorable, a lot of people at book club did. And I am never here to yuck somebody's yum. If you liked these books, I'm so happy for you, and I'm so happy for the authors because that means that they worked for people and that people will continue to buy those authors' books and promote those authors, and that's a good thing. We love to see authors' works loved and promoted throughout the community, even if they don't work for everybody. So while I really am not a negative person, this is just your typical end of the year kind of wrap up of some of the books that did not work for me. And the good news is, out of the hopefully 75 books, we're not quite at the end of the year yet, I have read this year, I only have 5 that are appearing on this list. So let's start with the book in 5th place, which is A Promise of Parido by Kate Golden. This is the sequel to A Dawn of Onyx. And if you've been around, you know I really liked A Dawn of Onyx. I loved the gothic vibes. I loved the characters that we were introduced to. And most of all, I loved the setting. Everything that I loved in the first book just felt like it took a U-turn in the sequel, A Promise of Parido. I don't know, it just did not work for me, and it did work for other people. In fact, if you want to see somebody who the sequel and the 3rd book worked for, I would recommend going and checking out Tori's channel at Tori Between Pages, because she really liked the conclusion of the series, whereas I was the opposite. I loved the beginning of the series and felt like it took a downhill turn. And I can't talk about this one too much since it is a sequel, but again, everything I loved about the gothic setting and everything was just null and void in the sequel, and I haven't picked up the 3rd book because this one was such a letdown for me. In 4th place, we have My Murder by Katie Williams. This was one of those books that was an in real life book club pick. And this one's really interesting because we're living in kind of this future world. This is like a sci-fi murder book. And our main character was in fact murdered. And through technology is brought back to life and is sitting with the fact that her murder is unsolved. However, all of the like crime aspects, murder solving aspects were done off page. I didn't really feel like this book stuck to what it promised. It's really short, and I just felt like not enough time was given to the murderer. And there was this really weird video game aspect in this book, and I just felt like it was really disjointed and choppy, and I didn't feel like I cared about any of the characters. I could have cared less if the main character solved her own murder, and for that, it is my 4th worst book of the year. In 3rd place, we have another in real life book club pick, and that was A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. Oh my goodness, how I could not stand this book. It is about a girl who runs into this guy at a bookstore. They kind of fight over who's going to get the last copy of the book. They think they're never going to see each other again, so she tells him like a sob story to get the book, and then fast forward a little bit, and these two have like an actual meet cute, and they realize that they kind of like each other, and then there's more lies, and then a relationship starts, but oh, there's more lies. I basically could not stand how much lying went into the relationship in this book, and like this book would have been non-existent if it weren't for lies. And in a romance book or like a women's fiction book, build your book on any premise except for cheating and lies. I couldn't take it anymore. I hated all of the lying that went on in this book. It was not a cozy, feel-good book. It was a book that made me mad at every lie that ever got told in this entire story. Can you tell I am passionate about the way I feel about this book? Because I am. That being said, though, there were people at book club that did in fact like this book. So I might not be in the majority, but I did not like it at all. In 2nd place, we have a book I read and DNF'd very recently. I almost made it to 50%. If I'm like 20% into a book and I DNF it, I won't even consider putting it on this list. However, How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. I am definitely in the minority of this book, but I could not stand the writing, and I could not stand the dialogue, and I could not stand how much it leaned into the campiness of the Grinch, and like, it makes my blood boil thinking about this book, and that's really mean. And like I said, I know I'm in the minority because literally every other person I've talked to, listened to, TikTok I've seen has loved this book. But this is about our main character, Story, and her sister, Taryn, and they move to their aunt's hometown in this very Christmassy town in Colorado. Like, everything is Christmas there all year round. And their aunt has a broken hip, and she's like, oh, my dream is to be the Christmas Kringle, which is like the person with the most Christmas spirit by winning all of these competitions. And so they basically like manipulate Story into competing in this Christmas competition. But her childhood friend, who is now kind of turned enemy, Cole, is like, someone who's not local to my Christmas town is not going to win the Christmas Kringle competition. And so he also competes. That sounds like a cute premise. However, the way that these two characters spoke to each other in their dialogue was more juvenile than the way that my 13-year-old students speak to each other. And that is saying something. So every time they spoke to each other, I was just cringing, rolling my eyes, waiting for their dialogue to be over. And then there was, like I also said, the campiness of how much it leaned into the Grinch. Guys, Cole's best friend's name is Max. Story has neighbors named Martha and May. Their aunt's name is Aunt Cindy Lewis, but you know what they're trying to go for. And I don't know, I can do a lot of silly, fun, goofy times, but this one was silly, goofy, campy, and it was not for me at all. And so you might be saying, wow, Heather, you sounded really heated about that book. What book could possibly be worse than that? Well, it was another book that I DNF'd about 45% in. How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Wexler. I had such high hopes for this book because I had heard that Django Wexler's Ashes of the Sun series was very, very good. And I haven't read that one yet. I'm still not writing this author off, which is saying something after you hear me talk about this book, but I do want to try that trilogy. This book was misogynistic. This book was sexist. This book had a protagonist that literally thought about nothing but how they could have sex with every character they encountered. And I mean every character. It didn't matter what species they were. That's all the character could think about, talk about. Their inner monologue was like a disgusting place to be for me. And the premise of it, you're gonna laugh at me when I have to say what I have to say, but it's about this woman who keeps being like regenerated every time she dies because she's trying to defeat the bad guy and defeat the Dark Lord. And eventually she's had enough of all of this regenerating and she's like, forget about it. I am going to become the Dark Lord so that nobody can defeat me. I am going to be evil incarnate. And it got so repetitive. Which, duh, like this whole book is basically a Groundhog Day premise of die, try again, die, try again, die, try again, but also with all of the misogynistic sexy talk and sexy times, and I hated it. I know that I'm not alone because I have seen other people have the same opinion as me on this one. This was actually in the top 3 for my first ever Patreon book club poll, and I am so happy that it did not win because I would have been embarrassed to read and host a live show of this book. So this was my worst book of the year. As always, you can find links to my social media, my Patreon, and other ways to support me and my channel down below. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye, guys.